Lyle Austin, president of John Patriot.
That's very flattering. There's actually more, Susan made the chili, is that right? Okay, and then Marlis and I made, it's a little bit of a twist, but we've got French dip with au jus on toasted bun. And then we also have some pretty incredible beef vegetable soup back there also. So, and like Pastor Ed said, whenever you want to eat, just get up and go get something to eat, and we'll just continue with the meeting. And now I've got to give this microphone back to Pastor. Oh, and I'm not supposed to use this as a pointer.
If you'd stand with me, let's pray, and then we're going to do the pledge together. Thank you. Heavenly Father, we just love you. We thank you for this opportunity to be here today. As you, Lord, bring others in tonight, we thank you that they'll be blessed too by this information. We need good information. Lord, we need righteous information that this brings to us. And so we thank you, Lord. Bless our speaker, each person that would contribute here tonight. We thank you, Lord, for your mighty presence. You never miss a meeting because you're hungry. Your people are hungry to know that you're with us. And so we thank you, Lord, and we just ask you to bless this entire night and make it so beneficial to each person. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. And bless the food. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Oh, well, I guess I can. Also, Wanda made a lot of desserts also that are back there. I forgot to mention that. So, what I'm going to do now is introduce a friend of ours. His name happens to be Rich Weber. I got that right, didn't I? Yeah, come on up here, Rich.
Hey, how's Gillette? It's my home away from home. Okay, we got a lot of material to put out. I think you know me from the property tax initiative. The other pot we're stirring is elections because it was the top two issues during the 2022 campaign. We got the property tax initiative done. It's on the ballot for 2026. So now we're going to work on elections a little bit. We were really lucky. We started this with Patty Junick and with Jill Kaufman back in September of 23. We had a hand count clinic right here in this very room with Linda Rance from Missouri. She was gracious enough to come in. And now we have Mr. Rick Weible tonight, who's a forensic systems engineer and election expert in that regard. So I just want to give you a couple of really quick tips. There are two components to any election system. One is the human side. They build the machine, the programs the machine, they operate the machine, and they verify the results. Then the second part of it is the machine. It only reports what the human tells it to do. If you follow the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and Cyber Information Security Agency's reports, the number one cause of election failure in the United States is internal threat. It is not China, it's not Russia, and it's not Iran. The leading cause of failure in the internal threat category is employee negligence. That's not saying it's nefarious or bad or evil intent. When you have elections and you bring in election clerks, you bring in legislators, you bring in others, they are not subject matter experts. They don't have 30 years of forensic experience. But what we've done in Wyoming with a 47-day legislature, we bought a complex system that almost nobody can operate without committing a slew of felonies. We're not alone. This is all the states in the United States, every election office that they went into. Talking about electronics, this is proven to be true in Florida when the grid down there got hacked. That was by the Chinese. We had a Social Security data breach. We had a Veterans Administration data breach. We had banks hacked, credit card companies, Home Depot, and we've had elections. The FBI gets hundreds of thousands of attacks annually, and they can't even address all the problems. They don't have a big enough institution to chase down all these electronic issues. From 2019 to 2020, there was a 69% increase that resulted in a $4 billion loss just in the financial sector of the United States. Hacking accounted for 70% of data breaches. Microsoft, JBL, the Colonial Pipeline, 37 million T-Mobile customers in 2023, and another 200 million in 2024. A ransomware attack knocked out 30 hospitals in 6 states simultaneously. The root cause, 95% of the cyber data breaches involve human error. In 2025, we had massive data breaches at Google, Microsoft, all their third parties, supply chains, credential theft. Yahoo had a data breach alone that affected 3 billion of their accounts. The solution for defending against electronic vulnerabilities in elections and in all those systems has been hand. If you have an electric thing in your office, a calculator, a computer, it's going to get hacked. A lot of it's passwords, some of it's just bad programming. But you have to do an audit and you have to do a reconciliation to see where you are. We don't do that in anything in Wyoming. Our clerks don't have oversight. Secretary of State doesn't have the authority. We've never conducted an election inspection of any of the county systems in the history of the state. We don't do it in the budgeting. We don't do it in spending. We don't do it in anything. We've always been on kind of a good old boy system in which we always rely on the goodwill and the well-being of the other guy. And this is how the last guy used to do it. Yeah, there's a lot here. I just want to point out to you the sophistication of this system. The last 5 bills we ran that went through the legislature and the 14 that just went through the interim committees are not going to address the problems that we had in Weston County this year or in Laramie County. We certified an election last year with a lawsuit pending in Laramie County by the GOP, and we didn't get resolution on that until May, way after the time that we could put somebody in office if the vote was affected. And the Weston County issue is still wide open. Criminal charges have been preferred against the clerk for subpoenas and all kinds of things. And what that really tells you is the judicial system is not going to save us. It's always late to the game. We don't have a judge that sits down in Cheyenne on election night to resolve election issues to make sure the right candidate gets into office. I'm going to stop there. His presentation is lengthy, but I think you'll find it worthwhile. This is Mr. Rick Weible. He's from South Dakota. He has 30 years of experience. He's probably the foremost man on elections and systems engineer, especially from a forensic aspect in the United States of America. Rick?
So this is about me. This is all the boring stuff. All you need to know is I wear glasses. I have a superpower that makes me a nerd. Okay, that's all you need to know. Born and raised in Minnesota, BA Political Science, University of Minnesota. Had elected office in the state of Minnesota, 14 years in St. Bonnie, Minnesota. And now in South Dakota, I have a little bit more fun. I have 3 for 3 for avoiding the machines because I've been selected, not elected. So I was appointed twice, and then my clerk said, well, you should actually run on the ballot. I ran on the ballot, got my 8 signatures, and because nobody challenged me, I'm automatically in. South Dakota has a cool little law that we don't want to waste time and paper on you if nobody's going to challenge you. So you're automatically sworn in. So it makes counting easier too. 8 years, I'm in GOP CD3 co-chair and state exec member. So Minnesota has 8 congressional districts. Of course, South Dakota and Wyoming, 1 each. So Minnesota's 8 times the size. So that wrangling monkey. I'm a certified network engineer. Worked at Help Systems, the first ISO 9000 software development company. So ISO 9000 is about continuous improvement, having processes in place. So that's where my logic comes in when I look at elections. Oh my gosh, they don't use that. It's terrible and it's unforgivable. 30 years of cybersecurity consulting experience. I'm also the CEO for D3 Defense. I moved to South Dakota in 2018 after my son went to South Dakota State University in 2016. We're walking around and said, so you can move back to Minnesota? He's like, not a chance. Broke my heart. And so we started moving to South Dakota to follow him. Then in 2020, I won my first election contest in Minnesota when the Minnesota Voter Alliance gave me a call and said, hey, our IT guy's out and our database guy's out. Can you help us look at some data? Because Steve Simon, the Secretary of State there, wants to do a la carte mail out ballots in Minnesota's primary. And I'm like, holy cow, no, that shouldn't be a thing. I know there's a lot of issues. Published a report, and there's 30,000 addresses without the first number of the house. And then there's 50,000 addresses that are apartments and dorms that don't even have a suite or apartment number. We publish all that evidence, we win. We prevent Minnesota from doing the a la carte mail out. But then during the general election in Minnesota, I buy the database 25 days after the election and 5 days after they canvass it. That propelled 8 cases in Minnesota. I identified that the clerks did not follow the law. Minnesota statutes requires that when they receive an absentee ballot, they must immediately enter it into the statewide voter registration system. Well, there were 720,000 absentee ballots not connected to a voter, absolutely violating the law. We screwed up because Ilhan Omar was busy having an affair with her campaign manager, and she moved from her registered address as a voter, and we didn't know where she was. So we served her in Washington, D.C., and the judge didn't like that, combined all of the 8 cases, even though they were different attorneys, and chucked them all. So I'm a little... On what grounds? Because we didn't provide proper service to Ilhan Omar. She needs to be served in Minnesota, not Washington, D.C. So yeah, that was a hard lesson. So then after that, I founded MidwestSwampWatch.com in 2021, where I put all of that evidence out there, which we found even more. We even found dystopian things like Minnesota has a post-election audit. One of the precincts came in a lady's purse that we're supposed to review, and we're like, oh, all sorts of chain of custody issues here. How much was the purse? What's the serial number? Where did that come from? And then they also, in another precinct, were short 450 ballots in one of the post-election audits. So we fought that as well. So it was completely dystopian. Then going out on the speaking circuit in Minnesota, kind of educating everybody what was going on, I evolved. So it was great to talk about the problems, but people wanted solutions. So then I founded uscase.org in 2023, where we actually start looking at the security issues of all the machines. We start creating the hand count process. Then we also start looking at logic and accuracy testing to make it more robust so that we could prevent what happened in Pennsylvania, where there was a judicial retention election and they were using the touchscreens. And as soon as they were voting for the one judge, that vote was going down to the one below. And then the judge below, when they'd click that one, the votes were going up above. Yeah. So we learned a lot. Then I also, with all of the voter rolls that I was working on in Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, and helping out other states, and Cause of America, I appeared in Vindicating Trump in the Last 30 Minutes. That was a movie that came out in September of 2024, right before the election. And they were shocked that I bought 10,000 blank ballots in the state of Minnesota. And I was able to print them out, bring them to Wisconsin, and work with the county clerk there to prove that I could inject them in her election. And then I bought another 5,000. So that was a non-technical way that I could prove that our elections aren't secure. But also we recorded who was who was purchasing ballots from Sea Change. That's where I bought the ballots from. They handle the absentee ballots for the upper Midwest, where they mail them out to the various states that are requesting mail absentee. And we also found out that there were nonprofit organizations that were going in and buying those ballots as well, and then giving them out to homeless people and inject them into the drop boxes. So we followed that whole thing. All right. So let's talk about Wyoming. So why do I talk about the other states? It's because the experience in the other states helped me look at and analyze all of the other states I go to. Minnesota, there's 108 ways that they cheat. South Dakota, there's 112. You have 116. So number one, Weston County, mismatched ballot styles. So there was a result and the result. So I don't know if many of you know Senator Ron Johnson out of Wisconsin. That's where that phrase comes from. There's the story or a story, and then there's the story. So that comes out of the Benghazi investigations, the Hillary Clinton server, everything else that he looks at COVID. So what was interesting is that the clerk really fumbled this election, and it showed us how vulnerable the elections were here. And it was unfortunate that she decided to gaslight the Speaker of the House by saying there was a protest vote out there. On social media, there was no such thing. He's a well-respected gentleman. We also identified equipment malfunctions, paper jams, scanning failures, touchscreen bugs, malware, and viruses. There was one of the counties that actually had a pop-up screen that we had to recommend that they go back to ES&S and reformat that entire system to protect the elections. So it took us over a year. Inadequate testing protocols, not all styles tested, folds not tested. Every single county in the 2024 primary election absolutely failed and violated your state laws. You cannot trust the elections here. There's also cybersecurity vulnerabilities. I'll show you all 4 of those so that you have details, including this county here and surrounding. So here's what happened in Weston County. You'll notice in this ballot here on the left-hand side that we have a state representative, House District 2, with a 2-year term of office for J.D. Williams, right? So for Chip Nyman, the terms of office wasn't there in the first production of the ballot. She realized the issue, reprinted the ballot, and then corrected it. However, the Oval shipped it down. And the other thing is that the timing marks, if you look at your yellow sheet that's on your chair, on the left-hand side, these are called timing marks. Also think of it as a barcode. It tells the machine what type of ballot this is, but it also tells it the locations of where the ovals are going to be that it needs to look for. So it's kind of like if you want to cheat in Battleship, you just move your little cruiser down where they call it, and that's one way to rig an election, is tell the machine that you're going to have it at B4, but when you print it out, it's going to be at B3, so it doesn't see it. So then the other thing that we noticed is that and also here for Weston counties, we see in the statute 22.6.120, the designation of offices and the applicable term of office shall be printed preceding the names of candidates for the office. So that's where she violated the law in the first place, but she tried to correct it. But then here's what's interesting. The definitions for your primary ballot and general election ballot, you're the only state that says a square equals an oval. So the legislature didn't want to fix the oval part because just like the ballots that you see there, they're all ovals, not squares. But in your law, squares are ovals. So, and you see that in the definition where square for purposes of chapter 6 of this code shall include box or oval used to designate the area for casting a vote. Thought you'd like that Easter egg. All right. So for those of you who have to leave right away, you can take a picture of this. These are the recommendations. So it's pretty rare that people put the conclusion up front. And there's 2 options within here. But the improvement recommendations, number 1, the Secretary of State shall have legal standing in submitting violations of the election law. So when it happened in Laramie County, then it also happened in so many of the other counties, including Weston. He didn't have the authority to actually submit the legal case. And testimony in front of the legislature, we hear from the governor's office that he doesn't have standing. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. Why doesn't he? If he's the officer that's supposed to have oversight of the elections and he's supposed to be in charge of uniform elections, how can that be? So that's where we would ask the legislature to clean that up a little bit. And counting for all, recount should be done, and it should also be considered as a valid as primary method of tabulation. And then improving the elections, I'm giving you 2 options, option A and option B, and we'll talk about the cost of both of those. So A, get rid of the machines and go to hand counting. Pretty simple, straightforward. Or B, you have to do all 8 of these things in order to secure your elections. Number 1, source code should be available to state parties for the audit of the source code. In Minnesota, the state party chair can go to the Secretary of State and actually audit the source code of the election systems. Dominion, ES&S, and HART, Minnesota has. But what's funny is Your state didn't even require that the source code be held so that if ES&S goes bankrupt, you don't have a path forward to actually legally edit the software to keep it maintained. So that's a mistake. 2, logic and accuracy testing should actually be reviewed by the Secretary of State. He doesn't review them. He only gets a certificate sent by the clerks that is kind of like a Ron Swanson of Parks and Rec. I'm perfect and I did what I did. Here's a certificate. That's kind of what they get. 3, all election systems shall have supported operating systems and current antivirus within 6 months. What's crazy about this is when you bought the systems, they were on, or the 6060 upgrade, that's on Windows 10. Well, October 14th was the end of Windows 10 for general support, while the counties are upgrading the rest of their machines to Windows 11. This machine is at risk, and you'll see why that's important in the next couple of slides. The antivirus, it's so out of date, it's comical, and we'll show you the response there as well. 4, any failed logic and accuracy contest must be hand counted to ensure integrity of the election results. So if a clerk gets it wrong, they should be required to do a 100% post-election audit on that contest. They didn't properly test. 5, eliminate write-in options for all races. South Dakota, we don't have write-ins. And come on, guys, I can't read your writing. Let's be honest. And under equal protection of the law, we should actually have all candidates printed on the ballots so that we select the ovals. We shouldn't allow last-minute candidates to basically usurp our elections and waste our time. 6, uncontested races shall automatically win and not be on the ballot. That's the South Dakota way. I love it. It makes it so much smaller. So like for precinct committee men and women during the primary, if there's only one person running, we can reduce the ballots. 7, all cast vote records reports shall be considered public records. So the green and yellow sheet in front of you, these are cast vote records or ballot images that you can download from Dodge County, Wisconsin for free. You can go back and get their elections from 2016 all the way forward. There's nothing scary about these. And it's a way to actually supervise and have oversight of the election. But there's a funny story there that we'll talk about a little bit later. Then number 8, post-election audits must be bipartisan. Hand count of election contests, I recommend at least 10% of the precincts with 4 races minimum. And right now what's happening is that your clerks are allowed to self-determine whether or not they did the election right by looking at the cast vote records and ballot images on their computer without oversight, and they get to make the call that everything was good. So that's kind of like having your accountant also do a self-audit. Yep.
Are those LNA checks, do they have CRCs associated with them? And can they be run on a continuous basis as a health check of the software?
They could, but they won't because of the way that the machines are built. They don't have enough memory. It's pretty skimpy. So no.
Are they checked before and after the election, just to make sure the results are the same?
Yeah. So part of the logic and accuracy test in your state law is that you test the logic and accuracy before, and then you also have a public accuracy, which is the cheerleading event that the public can come in. So hopefully both of those match, but we don't see clarity in that. Then you also have then the election itself, and then there's supposed to be another post-election audit where they're supposed to run it again, but they're not. So option A, the cost is priceless per confidence. Option B will cost you millions to cross that Rubicon. And you'll still have uncertainty. So to add kind of a little education here, we have 2 ballot styles here right out of the gate. So over here, we have the express vote ballot with the barcodes on the top. And then over here on the right, we have the standard ballot with the ovals that you would fill in. So what we have to make sure is equally, because they are 2 separate ballots. Ovals are different than barcodes. And the clerks uniformly are not understanding that. So here is a manual that's publicly available in California. Your manuals are not publicly available for you, the public, to understand and have oversight of your election officials. Colorado and California both have their manuals online. And what's interesting is that this manual here from 2017 talks about how they should do the testing. For example, in an office with 5 candidates, the first candidate on that ballot will receive 1 vote, the second candidate 2 votes, and the third 3, and so on. Okay? But your clerks aren't doing that uniformly. And they even talk about how to test the express vote cards as well. So this is a manual from 2017 in California. Then we jump forward to a newer system, and we see that the paragraphs are exactly the same. And so what's really sad is that, unfortunately, Minnesota, this manual is from the state of Minnesota, which is the 6060 manual. I'm involved in a Minnesota Supreme Court case regarding modems being used in Minnesota, so I have fair access to the DS200 manuals. And in there, they actually talk not about the actual details. They instead refer to the federal standard of the election management guidelines as a shortcut. And also in their DS 450 and 850, they don't have that link in there to point to the federal standards. But here are the federal standards. There's the website, there's the cover, and here is the detail here where we can actually see, for example, officials commonly use vote a 1, 2, 3 pattern where the first position receives 1 vote, the second 2, etc. And they also warn you, test ballots from all potential sources, vendor printed, printed in-house, on demand, or from a ballot marking device. Pretty clear, right? That's the federal standard from the United States Election Assistance Commission. So when we get clerks that gaslight us, we know they haven't done their due diligence of reading the federal standards when they're receiving federal dollars from the Help America Vote Act to purchase their equipment. So now let's focus back on your statutes. 22-11-104, they're supposed to have a predetermined number of valid votes for each candidate and on each measure. So let's take a step back. Is 0 a valid vote? No. That's right. It's not a vote. So you have to take an action in order for the machine to be tested. They have a separate area where you're supposed to feed in blank ballots to make sure that the machine is not making up numbers. So you have to have at least 1. Well, we found quite a few clerks that had 0 on some of the candidates, so they weren't tested. Then, and your legislature is really good with these laws here. During the test, a different number of valid votes shall be assigned to each candidate for an office and for and against each measure. So that seems to be in line with the federal standards of the 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And your legislature is flexible enough to say, if you want to mix it up, just as long as they're different, go for it. Then, this is the hard part. If any error is detected, the cause of it shall be ascertained and corrected, and an errorless count shall be secured and certified by the county clerk. Well, the problem with that is they're not smart enough to determine if there's an errorless count because they're not testing everything correctly.
No, they're not.
Oh, yeah, they know. We've been doing this presentation for a while, and I'll give you evidence that they do know. Right here. Mind you, we are just totally in sync. So we notified Chuck Gray when, thank God, Jill, when she invited me out here, I said, all right, I want to do something new for your state. Because your state laws are so good, and each of these are felonies that we walk through, I wanted her to go through and track the primary election of 2024 as it was happening and grab all the public accuracy tests. We have them all. They all failed. So then Chuck, we worked with the Secretary of State's office, gave him the evidence and notified him. He then sends out a letter to every single clerk asking them to retest. He even offers, hey, we will actually help you design the logic and accuracy test. Not one clerk took him up on the offer. That's disgusting. That's why we need to give him more teeth and enforcement on this. And he was very specific in his letter and pointing to the statutes. And during the test, a different number of valid votes shall be assigned to each candidate as office. And so he was very specific, and they weren't doing it. So here are the 6 felonies that one statute puts your clerks at risk for. And so I rebroke it out because the statute's really messy, and we should actually rewrite it as kind of like a checklist so that they'll actually read it, because it's just a run-on paragraph. It's a hot mess. So here it talks about political party representatives may be present for the test, which shall be held at least 2 weeks before the election. There are a couple counties that actually didn't hold their test 2 weeks before the election. They held it afterwards, so that's a violation. Then 2, the test shall ascertain that the automatic tabulating equipment will accurately count the votes cast for all offices and measures. So anywhere that they had a 0, they didn't do the test. That would be a violation, right? All right, then 3, the test shall be conducted processing a pre-audited group of paper ballots or ballot cards on which are recorded a predetermined number of valid votes for each candidate and on each measure. This is a problem with the legislature. This whole thing of paper ballots or ballot cards should be changed to and. Because the auditors are reading this like I only have to test one, not the other. Or the clerk, sorry. So we need that cleaned up. But you'll see where we catch them on the other side. There's a piece of paper that they sign. 4, it shall include each office one or more ballots which have votes in excess of the number allowed by law in order to test the ability of the automatic tabulating equipment to reject with such votes. My heart breaks on this one because when you have 5 candidates and you're only allowed to pick one, they're only sending in one overvote. An overvote is if you select where that race you can only vote for one and you select 2, that vote is in essence canceled out. That's an overvote. And so if you put it into the machine, it should reject it back to you, giving you an opportunity to redo the ballot. Okay. But what's happening there is they might just test the top 2 ovals and they'll skip the rest of the ovals for overvotes. So they're not robust enough. Okay. Then assigning a different number of valid votes should be assigned to each candidate. And you'll see here where they missed it. And then also the error has to be ascertained. So that's a heavy load. And this is the statute that I'm referring to that basically says, yeah, those are felonies. So anywhere that we saw the word shall, you break that, that's a felony. Okay. And so any official, deputy, or assistant who commits a violation of the election code is guilty of a felony and is subject to removal from office and a proceeding instituted for that purpose. But we didn't want to do that. And so we were talking with the county chairs that, look, if you're going to remove them, we prefer to work with them and help them fix this rather than just outright fire them. Because if you're going to remove somebody, you better have a backup plan and somebody else to step into their place. Because otherwise, we're wasting everybody's time. All right, here's the biblical backing, Leviticus and Proverbs. We are just literally asking for equal weights and measures, the balance of scales. So as Christians, we have nothing to be afraid of when we're just asking for equality of how the ballots are being tested to make sure that it's done right. That may be a communication method that we can work with clerks who are Christians who might have their eyes opened up a little bit. Here's what happened in Platte County in 2022. So all of these candidates have 9 votes. That doesn't prevent vote flipping. It could mask it. 69-69, 13-13. So then we look at his primary election, and he has overvotes. He only has 1. Here's where the problem is. You guys actually have 3 ballot styles. So you have the one with the ovals that are printed by the printer and then delivered to the county. But then you have another one that's called ballot on demand that also prints out those ovals. The problem with that is that every single printer has copyright and trademark. So the margins are different. The fonts are slightly different. The intensity is slightly different. So those ovals can actually be in a different spot. It'd be a problem. So, and the ovals could be shifted if the margin's not the same as the printer. So you could be a 1/4 inch off and not hitting the boxes. So here, because there's 3 ballot styles, the express vote machine prevents overvotes. So the minimum number that we should see here is 2. So he didn't test the ballot on demand, more than likely. So that's how we know he's busted. Then when it comes to write-in totals, we know he's busted because he said that he used all 3 ballot styles. There's only 2. Minimum number I should see is 3. Okay. Then coming over here, precinct committee man overvotes 1. That should be a minimum of 2. So we know he didn't test one of the others. So then we look further at the general election, and he did it again for the general election where he didn't test one of the ballot styles. So probably the print on demand. And then these numbers don't make sense either. So when we look at the presidential race, this is what we should expect So if we're using the standard ballot, the express vote, ballot on demand, we should see numbers like 12, 9, 6, 3, and 2. We don't see that there. So that's how we know he didn't do it correctly. All right. So in Campbell County, this one was a hot mess during the primary election, where we see that there's 4, 4, and 4. So you didn't prevent the candidates from vote flipping in there. It's all hidden. They should be different. And you want to have it uniform. Then over here on the overvotes, we see a bunch of 1s sitting in here. So we know that she didn't test either the standard ballot or the ballot on demand. Well, and here's the thing. So this is the most important part. This certificate that she signs states on it that further, I have confirmed that each ballot tabulation device was set to 0 and subsequently tested by using the following ballot types: express vote, ballot on demand, and printed by printer. That's where we're getting the 3 from. So if the law isn't quite clear, the certificate they are signing to the Secretary of State is crystal clear. And if you file a false certificate to the Secretary of State's office as a business, that's a felony. That's also a felony. Okay. Yes, sir.
Instead of trying to corral all these hundreds of cats.
Yes. Verse 23.
Can't each one of the counties submit to you every one of their paper ballots, every form of ballot that they hope to run, and then have the software configured at a central location, all the quality checks done, CRC and everything, and then have that loaded onto the individual machines?
So you wouldn't do it that way, but what the clerks do have the opportunity to do is the logic and accuracy test deck. They log on to ES&S's portal, and they can actually order the standard ballot logic and accuracy test decks pre-printed for them. So the ES&S does that for them. Now, when it comes to the disability devices, they have to have a team of people come in and actually touch the screens and do the voting. When it comes to the ballot on demand printers, they need volunteers as well. All right, so then Converse County, this is even worse. We have 3 1s right there. So which ballot style was tested? And if we just step back and let's say the clerk says, I'm not going to use ballot on demand because I'm so awesome, I'm just going to order extra ballots, that would be allowed. And so they don't need the ballot on demand. But the reality is they still have the express vote. So a minimum number would have to be 2, and you still have to have the uniqueness. And the crazy thing of this is that there's a federal law that we all know about, the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. She violated the Constitution of equal protection under the law. And so this is actually a U.S. civil rights case that this creates. So not only did she violate your state laws, she violated federal. Okay.
Can you explain that a little bit better? Who did actually civil rights did she violate? Everybody's?
Everybody's, because we don't know if it was the standard ballot, or those rights that were violated, or the express vote disability rights that were violated. So we would need the Department of Justice to come in and investigate. So that would be a harmony deal.
She would do this logic and accuracy testing before we came in. And then she'd do it again because she had made sure that it was what she thought was right.
Yep. And so she doesn't clearly understand. And then you have the other 2s down here as well. Right. And then we see it again over here in the Republican governor. You've got a 1 here and a 1 here, a 2 here, and a 2 there. So it's just a complete violation. Going into Converse again, overvotes. And then this is Crook County. We see a lot of 1s right here. So that means the other ballot style was not tested at all. This is for the general election. So they didn't learn their lesson from the primary and still making the errors in the general election. And so at a minimum, and she signed this certificate that says that she tested all 3. So that means the minimum number has to be 3 here, not 1. Okay. Then in Weston County, the primary election, she has this candidate right here with a 0. And she signed that she tested all 3 of the ballot styles, but how can that be when you have a 0? Thankfully, we do have Kleenex boxes here that you can use those at the ready. So, I mean, it's a little bit, makes you want to cry a little bit.
So do they know they've been found out?
Oh, yeah. And that's why they're trying to gaslight me in front of the legislature, especially Malcolm. So that's why I'm helping do this tour to show you guys the actual evidence so that you know. And then you can start having conversations. And then also to encourage you that for the next set of elections, yeah, you all better be there for the logic and accuracy test. I'm also asking the legislature to help you out by requiring the clerks to post their logic and accuracy test reports by precinct detail to their websites so that you have enough time to review and help them. Okay. Uinta, 2727, 1818, duplicate numbers. That's not valid. Then, so this is interesting. So this report comes from the election management system, the computer. So it's an end report after everything is done. So we asked her for their special election, hey, can we get the logic and accuracy test report for the 2025 special election? She gave us this. This is the expected results workbook that is on Excel that she keys in. It's not the end report. And she told us, well, I don't have that report. We know she lied. Then she finally told Chuck Gray, well, it's sealed up with the ballots. I responded back to Chuck Gray to say, oh, yeah, she can go back to that PC, fire it up, and reprint the report because the PC is not sealed. So that's somebody else you can't trust when they play games like that. And she was at least honest enough here that when she signed the 2025 election, I'm not going to use ballot on demand. Thank you. That's clear. I understand that. And I actually appreciate that because the ballot on demand creates additional risk because that equipment was not certified by ES&S and it should not be used in your state. All right. So here's the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the laws. And that's easy that the clerks are failing at that. So now let's take a look at President Trump's executive order that he signed on March 25th. There's 5 main areas that you need to be concerned with. And we're running out of time. It's really scary. Number 1, proof of citizenship requirements. Your state already has this. And now you're in the driver's seat with President Trump because your state passed this proof of citizenship and my state was the backup to it. And I worked with both states to get this through. My state has proof of citizenship, but we also create a federal only ballot for those that are in the state for less than 30 days. And I predicted that my old friend would come in and sue your state. I was right. And Chuck prevailed along with the RNC. Okay. So now with the other 19 states suing President Trump regarding this executive order specifically on the proof of citizenship requirements, because your state already went to federal circuit, now Trump can grab that case and take it right to the Supreme Court. All right. Then the review of a state voter registration list. I can tell that Chuck has been doing that because he has several posts on Facebook talking about how they have identified with the partnership of Homeland Security and the Real ID program that there are, and also Social Security, that there are voters that he has sent to the clerks to have removed and cleaned up. Not all states are doing that. Require all absentee received by election day. So there's a lot of states that kind of mess that up. Minnesota takes 3 or 4 days afterwards and they'll accept the absentee ballot. We saw California in 2024's congressional elections, how the vote shifted and they allowed for 3 weeks after the election. Then we get into the fun one, the Voluntary Voting System Guidelines 2.0. This is a way to secure the machines, have higher standards, and to have better accountability regarding the machines. And then federal funding. So what's interesting is that the current ES&S system that you have in your state and my state is certified for 1.0. So back in March, Trump basically told the EAC and equipment manufacturers, you can even take an existing system and submit it for the requirements of 2.0. But because ES&S failed to do that, we don't believe that their current systems are up to the new standards. Okay. Your state is one of 35 states that requires testing by the EAC certified test lab and requires EAC oversight and certification, an actual certificate. There's a joke coming for that one. You'll love it. Let's see here. Then, so when we looked at the voluntary voting system guidelines and we look at, there's only one manufacturer that crossed the deadline, and it was Hart. Dominion didn't do it. ES&S didn't do it. That's 80% of the elections in the United States don't have an option for a 2.0 without switching vendors. Okay. Then we looked at, well, have they even submitted a system so that we can see if it's under test? Well, Voting Works and Smartmatic have, but ES&S and Dominion haven't even filled out an application to test a new system. That's a horrible position to be in. So the National Conference of State Legislatures talks about this, saying it's going to take an incredible amount of time to basically build new systems, test them, get them with a budget into the state legislatures, get them into the counties to be able to have them up and running. They said that in April. And we're still here at this point today in November.
So does this almost mandate him?
Well, no. I think legislators and clerks and SOSs are going to become creative. So let's think about, what does Trump have the authority of? And let's step back to see what the Constitution of the United States has authority of. So when it comes to U.S. congressional races, the U.S. Constitution is pretty clear under Article 2 that it's the state legislatures that set the time, place, and manner for choosing their House representatives. It's silent on president and U.S. Congress. So Trump, with his executive order, basically takes those two lanes. But the states, the rest of the elections for their legislature, for their commissioners, for the city council and school board, that's managed by the state. The federal doesn't have oversight of that. So we may end up with a weird jungle where we have the federal elections hand counted and a separate ballot for the state elections to get them through the machines. That's what I think is going to happen. Those are some of the rumors I'm hearing. So I asked back in May 1st, Mayday alert, how are things going? And I noticed something on the EAC's website that a date was wrong when I was looking at certified systems and also systems under test. Well, they have a bug on their system that it's the date of when the website was created, not the date that the last time it was updated. So I asked about that, and so that's my Mayday. And then at that time, I asked them about ES&S and Dominion because they weren't there, and they confirmed they hadn't received any applications yet. So federal funding has gone down. The 2025 election security grant for the entire United States went from $55 million to $15 million. Our two states used to receive $1 million a year on the election security grant. This time around, we got something right around $250,000 for each of the states. But Wyoming is sitting on a lot of money from HAVA resources that they could buy new voting systems. That's the good news. The bad news is I can't tell the legislature to buy anything because to comply with the order, because ES&S, your current partner, doesn't have a certified system with pricing. That's not great. And especially if we take another step back and we look at nationwide, Texas has their primary in March. Their absentee ballots go out in January. We are on a collision course of chaos. And they also talk about this as well, how much it takes. It takes several months to get it in. Federal funding has nothing in there. So what I want you to imagine, this is a certificate of your voting system here in Wyoming. I want you to imagine you're going to take some drug to kind of help your stomach or ailment. And what if it said this on it? This certificate is not an endorsement of the product by any agency of the U.S. government, and no warranty of the product is either express or implied. What are you doing? That gives you all the warm and fuzzies, right? The other thing is that there's certified hardware that is supposed to be used in your equipment. And you'll love the notes on this. So There's actually Dell desktops and laptops that are supposed to be used. Delkin thumb drives that are supposed to use. You can't use thumb drives from Walmart to use them in there. And that's because these Delkin thumb drives have some cool little security features in there. They have a serial number on the outside, and then they have a chip that basically broadcasts the serial number inside the machine so it shows up in the system logs and the election logs for chain of custody. So we can see where things are going. So as it goes from the DS200, and then it goes to the election management system, we can actually see the chain of custody of all that data and what thumb drive happened in there. So that's why that's important. So this is a closer view. So it's a Dell Latitude Optiplex desktops. But here's what they say in their own manual on page 2 of every manual in the United States. They have a United States Election Assistance Commission notification for approved voting systems. In accordance with the United States Election Assistance Commission Testing and Certification Program Manual version 2.0, ESMS hereby notifies the purchaser that any changes or modifications to an EAC approved voting system which have not been tested and certified by the EAC will void the certification for such an EAC approved voting system. So you can't go in, grab the EMS machine and upgrade it to Windows 11 at the county level. So your IT people at the county have no authority to do it because it would decertify the equipment. Okay. But here's what's funny. We caught the EAC in a lie to your state. So this here, if we take a step back, is from the Help America Vote Act. How many of you guys remember Florida's hanging Chad problem, Gore v. Bush, right? So that's where the Help America Vote comes in. The courts basically look at it and said, we're not touching this hot potato. You, Congress, go fix this. You represent the people. So they created the Help America Vote Act. They actually define what a voting system is. And the way that statutes work and laws is that we've got the title here, voting system defined. Then we have a 1 and a 2. And so, Mr. Bear, when you have this type of indentation underneath B, that is all inclusive, correct? Yep. All right. So here's the magic trick. And what we want to make sure is that the voting system also includes to make available any materials to the voter, such as notices, instructions, forms, or paper ballots, your ballot on demand printers. We asked that question through Chuck Gray to the EAC. They decided to lie to us and try to tell Chuck, don't worry about it, you're fine, by only talking about voting systems in 301B1. That should be -2. And they're saying that the ballot on demand is not necessary. That's false. That's a big deal, as we see here. So this is where I'm working on a False Claims Act for your state and multiple states, because it is illegal to use federal dollars on non-certified equipment. And what's great is there's precedents. This is an old law from 1863. And there's a case out there that was ruled on where Clarence Thomas, on an 8-0 vote, there was this young lady who was 16 years old. She was having a mental health crisis. Her parents take her into this clinic. Then 3 of the 4 people writing prescriptions were not licensed to write prescriptions. On top of it, the clinic was not accredited. So when the clinic tried to get reimbursements from the family and also their insurance and Medicaid, it went up several layers of courts. The family loses rights to sue the doctors and the clinic. Once this landed on Clarence Thomas's desk, he said, no. You violated federal law. You are not owed that money because the clinic wasn't properly accredited and the 3 of the 4 doctors that caused the death were not properly licensed. Then he looks at the family and says, this is your lucky day. Go sue them in the ground. Reestablish their rights. So this has that parallel with Medicaid, Medicare dollars, as well as the Help America Vote dollars. Yes, sir.
So in case of Dominion versus lose then if Dominion wasn't even certified.
So the problem there is that's a different case, and that's coming out of Minnesota, where you have a liberal judge that has actually made rulings before any of the evidence has been heard.
So
So
he can go back, or can he get it reversed?
he can get it reversed. What he's going to have to do is we're going to end up taking it to the Minnesota Supreme Court. Then once we fail in the Minnesota Supreme Court, we can take it to the 8th District out of Missouri, and we'll have a more favorable ruling. In the election contests that I've been in, I'm 42 out of 46 cases in the last year of winning, and most of those are coming out of the 8th District Court. So ES&S statement 6060, this is your voting system. It tells us that it will be upgraded to Windows 10 with Windows Server 2016, and that's where you're at right now. But there's this chapter here. So the EAC created the voluntary voting system guidelines, but because in 2005 your state adopted the voluntary voting system guidelines like a building code and requires it for voting systems, I corrected the guidelines so it's required in your state, because that's when your state adopted it. It's like a building code or a fire code, any of those things that an outside organization writes and then your state or community adopt it. Okay? So here, there's a really simple little area that I'm focusing on, which is vendor shall develop and document the procedures to be followed to ensure that such protection is maintained in the current status. And this is in regards to microviruses, worms, Trojan horses, and logic bounds. Here's where it gets a little squirrely. So when your clerk tells you that their machines aren't connected to the internet and they're air gap, they're lying to you. And this is what we've discovered. Your clerk sits here on her county machine, logs into ES&S's portal on the internet, uses one of the Delkin thumb drives to copy the election definitions down onto the thumb drive using a county computer. Then they come over to another uncertified device called Systor, where they stick the original thumb drive in, and then they make copies for the other equipment in your jurisdiction. Then they take those copies and put them into the DS200, the Express Vote, and then the Central Count tabulator. Then on top of that, while those are festering in here, they have another set of thumb drives that go into the EMS reporting laptop for the election night results. I've advised the clerks you should do what South Dakota does, which is you require ES&S to mail them to you. Make ES&S 100% liable for the security part of it. Don't let your county computers get into it at all that are connected to the internet. Okay? If you want to order your test ballots, yes, that's fine. You want to log in and order parts? Yes, that's fine. But do not download the software here, put it onto a thumb drive, and inject it into the election equipment. Okay? So these are the viruses in 2024 and malware. So 74 million. That's what your machine is unaware of. Plus the ones so far this year, 89 million. We're on record pace already. We haven't finished off the year yet. So your current system here doesn't know about all of this over the history of viruses. That's a bad position to be in. In 2025, this is what it's unaware of. Now here's where they actually have opportunities to make changes. The EAC has a process called engineering change orders. So you can actually say, for example, a CMOS battery, they had to have a new vendor for the Express Vote devices. And then also this camera cable for the DS850. It's basically 8 wires. It's a Cat7 cable. But here's what's funny. So if they have to have these approved, why don't they have to have your ballot on demand PCs approved? That has way more than 8 wires, and it has a CMOS battery. Plus memory, a hard drive, an operating system. That's the whole joke of it. Then what was great is that ES&S provided an engineering change order to protect your systems. And this was regarding Print Nightmare and also an antivirus update. Print Nightmare allows people like me to connect to your Bluetooth printer that has it on there and then remote in through the USB cable to basically access your hard drive without a single trace. I can manipulate anything I want. Here's the status of that. When let's see here. This is your contract at the county level, where it basically says that the Secretary of State is responsible for asking ES&S for any updates. There's no way Secretary of States or clerks are monitoring the EAC website to determine whether or not there's an update for their system. No, it should be the other way. ES&S should be contacting the state to say, hey, we have an update for you. Well, here's where that bit. We got a letter from July 31st, 2024, where they talked about the engineering change order 1141 is something that can be updated. However, ES&S would need approval before any update is made. Attaches a request for approval letter in 2022. This is something we should have followed up with. So that means your 2022 election and your primary election in 2024 was not protected. 100% at risk. But right now, since October through now, the AAC has been shut down. So they're not approving new systems. They're not looking at engineering change orders, none of that stuff. However, sounds like there's breaking news that maybe things will reopen up here in the next couple of days. All right. Now, in my system, here's what's interesting. Even the color of a tote bag that goes inside the DS200 that catches the ballots throughout the election day, they changed it to a light blue, and that required an engineering change order. That's how severe they are. They're supposed to be, but they're not. So I asked the EAC, because I have 4 uncertified laptops in South Dakota that I have a case on, and then you guys have 23 desktops and 23 sys stores that are at risk in your elections. So I asked about the laptop, and they said, yes, if the laptop is being used as part of an EAC certified voting system, then yes, the county should look to have the vendor submit an engineering change order. Adding new models of laptop to an already certified system with an ECO is very common. Then I also asked about the antivirus. They said, yes, the ECO process can be used to update antivirus definition files and other security updates. And you could tell he was a little pissed because he also pointed me extra credit to the notice of clarification, which gives me a lot more evidence. But let's go back first to this here. So the date that this was submitted was on May 31st, and it was approved by the EAC on 6/8. So that's pretty robust. That's not much of a delay. And we see that in his response to me that he talks about this EAC 2019 statement that they're saying that they're going to get it done in less than 100 hours. Okay. But you haven't had an update since June 8th, 2022. So this is where they violated the law. And then I have today submitted a HAVA complaint to your Secretary of State that they broke the HAVA rules by not updating the systems. Yes.
How soon before the election night do they have to report that they've tested everything and they're not going to make any more changes to the hardware, software, or anything? It's
2 weeks before the election.
2 weeks.
Yes, that's what your law is, because that's where they do the logic and accuracy test. They put all the seals in, and they're supposed to be good.
That doesn't give you much time to remedy something.
Well, it actually does, because the way that your state law is written, which is kind of funny, it says at least 2 weeks before, which gives them the opportunity to pick 50 days before. But they're reading the statute wrong. So what's interesting is that your system is up here at 6060. Mine is here at 6110, but they have new systems, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 6.5. They haven't brought to your state for review because those have newer antivirus definition files, and also the Linux operating system on the DS200, 450, and 850 are all updated to a new version that's supported. So 6040, it has not had any engineering change orders for updating its antivirus. So they're running the same thing. And here they had this approved in late 2023, and we see it's Windows 10. Then we see the 6.5, and that was approved in late 2024, still Windows 10. So just a little over a year away, everybody in the public knows that Windows 10 is not going to be supported anymore. Why haven't we upgraded the systems to Windows 11 to protect the county systems? Yep, go ahead.
So just out of curiosity, the thumb drives that are used are always supplied by ES&S.
Great question. We know that is false because we know that several clerks have bought them on the used market and also auction houses, and that's inappropriate.
And they've testified to that in committees.
Correct. Yeah. And so I would encourage the legislature to actually get all the invoices, and hopefully the invoices have the serial numbers of which ones were bought aftermarket versus in-house. They should be documenting it because each of them have their serial numbers on it.
And that's both on testing and certification.
Correct. So 6.5 still not covered. So there's no time to fix this as we look at Texas. We even look at your state. You've got a primary coming up next August. Mine is in June in South Dakota. Texas sitting there in March. And so luckily some of these early states are kind of going to blaze the path for where we go. Your legislature and my legislature are the same in that they meet for such a little time in January, February, and March, and then it's over. And so unless you have an interim committee or a special session. And bless you.
Thank you.
And in your state, there's a false interpretation regarding all voters shall be guaranteed absolute privacy in the preparation of their ballots, and the secrecy of the ballot shall be made compulsory. Well, we know before the machines they hand counted because they didn't exist when your Constitution was made. So the arguments that we see from the AG's opinion that wasn't actually filed with a court, she's off base. Then even the clerks, they're off base. And so you should have transparency in your elections, because the key phrase here is transparency is the inoculation to all conspiracy theories. So getting those logic and accuracy tests published, getting these cast vote records published on county websites, those are things that will help install trust in the elections. And by the way, the cast vote records that are created by the machines and the ballot images, they're randomized. That's been a requirement since 2005, so that you can't go to the fifth ballot and know that was Aunt May, that was the fifth person that voted. So these are your two main ballot styles. I'd get rid of the ballot on demand as quickly as possible. Here's some of the things on what we see out in the wild of voters. Let me take a pause here. Let me go back to Weston County. So the issue with Weston County is that she saw the error on the one race, then reprints a second version of the ballot. Then she sees the error on the county commissioner's race because she didn't have them rotated throughout the different precincts, so that each person has a shot at first place and last place equally, as best they can, as your state law requires. So then she had three versions of the ballot there. The problem that she had is she messed up and didn't quarantine the two bad styles and spoil them all. No, she released them all into the election wild. So then when they came back, because all the timing marks on the right, on the left-hand side were exactly the same, it only knew about one of the designs and misinterpreted the other two designs. So that's another failure, is that every time we design a ballot, it should have a different timing mark. But she should have spoiled the ballots up front first. And then she tries to gaslight a good man in your House of Representatives, saying that that was a protest vote. Oh, we're looking at social media. I'm like, no, there's no way. So I was in contact with Gray's office and a couple other attorneys going, no, I'm not finding that. I think there's something nefarious here, and I think it's accidental, because I went on to that county's website and downloaded all the sample ballots, and it was version 1. All right. So here's some of the things that we see out there where voters will fill in the oval for two candidates, and then they try to say this one: machines don't understand voter intent. If you're hand counting, you would see that, and you would actually say, okay, I will take Tim Michaels. But a machine is going to take both of those and actually say that's an overvote, and the voter will lose that vote. The rest of the ballot will be fine. Same thing over here, where the two ovals are filled, and the voter said no on this one. So that's also an overvote. Over here, we have a voter with potentially arthritis who doesn't want to go to the touchscreen machine because they feel discriminated against, and they circle the candidate of their choice, but the machine doesn't understand circles. It needs to be in the oval. So these are three examples that hand counting would catch that machines do not. Then the other fun one is when we get people that are so excited to vote for their favorite candidate, they will actually circle the oval and write them in. All right. But it's equal. They did it for Trump as well. Okay. But then there's the other issue, the folds. In the 2020 election, there were so many folds on ballots that it corrupted the elections. So if we take a look at the green ballot that's in front of you, you'll see the black lines going across left to right on the top and bottom of the ballot. Take a look at the bottom there in the governor's race on the lower left-hand corner. You'll see that it's going through the oval of write-in. The ES&S manual specifically warns clerks and auditors, when you fold ballots, make sure that the lines and the folds don't go over any of the ovals or the timing marks. It's right in the manuals. In this case, ES&S is the one that designed this ballot, so they don't test before sending it out. That we've learned hard as well. So in this case, this voter sent in an absentee ballot, and we can actually look at the cast vote record on the back here, and we can see that Michaels is overvoted and write-in is overvoted. So that voter who voted absentee lost their selection. And what was great is that the clerk tried to gaslight me and say, well, no, our resolution board would have caught it. Well, the very fact that this cast vote record exists, that's the final. Because if they had fed the ballot in, it would have rejected it if it was programmed right, and then the resolution board would have corrected it. But the fact that this exists means that either the programming on the tabulator accepted overweight votes and didn't prompt them to investigate, or didn't filter it out on the DS450. Okay. So that's one reason why I don't trust these machines. Another one is a voter issue. So take a look at the yellow sheet. And what's cool about this one is that we can see on the right-hand side, second to bottom race, that Dale Schmidt is being selected. But if you look at write-in, there's a little pen rest in there. That is enough sensitivity to throw off this vote. And if you look at the back of the cast vote record, you can see over there, Dale Schmidt overvoted and write-in overvoted. So these are voter training issues, and voters have to be aware that when they put the ballot into the tabulator, that if it spits it back, hopefully the election officials, the election judges are helping them through that to try and recognize it. But most people would miss that pen rest. So, and it was fun talking to Peter Pocan that the line for the folds in the ballot for the Republican. So anybody who didn't vote at all for this race, the Republican was picked. And anybody who voted for the Democrat and mailed it in, their vote was canceled. So it makes you wonder, do election officials know this? Yeah, they do. We've caught a few. All right, so we have resources over at uscase.org. We have the antivirus research that's been updated through a couple days ago, ES&S modem security, hand counting materials, and also test decks. But the other thing here is we have a website called helphandcount.com. You can sign up there and get your activists signed up so that you can actually figure out if you have enough volunteers now to hand count in each of your counties. If you sign up here, I'll give the results to the state party chair as well as each of the county chairs so they can kind of go through and see if they have enough people. So if you're going to present any bills to do hand counting, make sure you have people signed up already. It's a lot easier to say, yeah, we have enough people for all the precincts, because right away the county clerks are going to say it's too hard to find people. I'll prove them wrong. Otherwise, you may have to go to a more robust post-election audit. All right, so this is a good time to take a break.